Well, I'm Bill Wisner. I'm a licensed embalmer and funeral director.
Uh-huh.
I work for Green Lawn Funeral Home South here in Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
I've been here 15 years in Springfield. I've been licensed for 50 years. And I was in the Army in 66 and 67. I served in Saigon at the U.S. Army Mortuary and from August 66 through August 67.
Mm-hmm.
I went over as an identification specialist, but I also had a license. And after we were there for a month or two, Colonel come through one day and he said, "We can't keep up." And he said, "We know that you boys have got license, and about 5 or 6 of us." And said, "If you'll come back here and work with us," he said, "we'll forget you're in the Army." So that's why I went back and I embalmed bodies at the U.S. Army Mortuary in Saigon for about 11 months.
I bet you were busy.
We worked 12 hours a day.
Wow.
We had two shifts. We started at 6 in the morning and ended at 6 in the evening. Then another shift come on at 6 in the evening, and they worked until about 2:30 in the morning, something like that. And every 2 weeks we shifted. We changed from morning to evening. And we had a real heavy load.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We had about 12 tables working, but you hardly ever had over about 8. It's probably about as many embalmers as we had going at a time.
Mm-hmm.
We were supposed to have 24 embalmers, but they were supposed to be civilian, but we run to the point where they didn't have enough civilians, so the boys that had licenses, which I had a license when I went, they put us to work in there with them.
Yeah.
And basically that's what I did for the year. Everybody we embalmed was a trauma case.
Mm-hmm.
And we picked up the bodies at the airport, and they come in Tonsanute. We got their flight line. I didn't do that too often. Once in a while I did. We happened to be kind of halfway caught up on embalming. I might go out and pick up a few, but most of the time we didn't. And we'd have days that we've maybe shipped 15, 20 bodies, and we had days that we have shipped high as 80 to 90 in one day.
Wow.
And that's basically what I did.
That's crazy. See, you never hear. I've never heard of it. This is the first. Did you? So you said you had your license. You were an embalmer before you went in.
Yes, I was a civilian embalmer. I'd had my license about. I think I had my license about 6 months before I went in.
Mm-hmm.
I had gone to mortuary school in Dallas, Texas, got my license, and I went through school. Then I came back and I served an apprenticeship at Browning Funeral Home in Fulton, Missouri for 12 months. And then I worked for him for another 2 or 3 months, and I got my letter that my friends and neighbors had nominated me for the Army. And so here we go. I went in and I talked to a recruiter guy that we knew there, and he said, if you'll sign up for regular Army, he said, I'll guarantee you where you want to go. So I thought, well, this would be a good chance to get a lot of experience and advance my civilian career, so that's what I did.
And I think a lot of guys sometimes go in, especially not then, but now with like CI stuff and engineering. I know that's one of my best friends is in the Navy, and that's why he went in. He's a math geek, and that's kind of where he went in with that, you know what I mean, in mind, which is nice now that it allows you to do that. And you kind of were, I guess, at the front running of thinking of doing that, which is really cool.
And that's about all I know. If you got any questions, I can answer.
Yeah. So, I guess it had more to do with the embalming thing. What made you want to get into that?
Well, I don't know for sure. I had thought about being a veterinarian when I started college, and I had to have 2 years of college, and the Missouri Veterinary School only takes 36 applications a year, or they did at that time. I don't know what they do now, and it was a very difficult thing to get into, and it was going to be a 7-year deal. So, and I had a brother working at a funeral home in Hannibal, Missouri, and I had seen some of that around him. I had a friend there that went into it, so I thought, well, I'll try. And so I went and did it, and I'm still doing it.
Still doing
Wow.
it. How many years now?
Well, I got my license in March of '66, but I started in mortuary school in March of '64, and I served my apprenticeship in '65, and then got my license. So I'll have my license for 50 years, 1st of March next year. But I've actually been working in it for 52 years now.
Yeah, wow.
And I worked for a funeral home in Dallas, Texas while I was going to school. And we worked for Sparkman Funeral Home. Now it's part of SCI. It's a big group now. But when I went to school, worked in a funeral home, lived in a funeral home.
I'm interested if they were so low on embalmers. I'm surprised you were only in for a year.
What?
Like, why? I mean, I'm just saying, like, you would think that if you were low on a certain job and they had no civilians coming in, did they eventually just meet that quota after a while, or did they just say, you've worked 12 hours for a full year every day, man, you can't take anymore, you're done?
I was ready to go home.
I can imagine.
I had 13 days left in the country. My dad died.
Yeah.
And I got to come home 13 days early.
Uh-huh. Well, that was nice they let you do that.
But the thing I see, it was a civilian job at that time.
Uh-huh.
And the civilians I made $164 a month over there in Vietnam, and 25% of that. See, I went over as a E2 and came back as a Spec 4 in a year. But I was making $164 a month, and they were making over $2,600 a month. Plus, they were getting all their expenses, villa, and everything provided to them. But
Do you want to what you want? I'm not rushing you, but
No, we can. Do you want to order? You want to order? We can keep
if
talking.
you want
What
to
do we
visit
got?
and then order, you go right ahead.
what do we order?
Whatever you want, sir.
I don't know.
I'm gonna go with the. Give me the Legion burger.
Okay.
I'm gonna take the step.
Legion burger, you want anything with it?
Fries.
Okay. Got it.
Just give me a tenderloin and fries.
Okay.
That'd be good.
Thank you.
Commander, you're welcome.
I'm gonna knock out the old club sandwich today.
Okay. You want anything with it?
No.
Okay. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So, back to what you were saying.
That's a pretty good pay increase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge pay
Yes.
increase.
But now, and right now, from what I understand, I haven't really kept up with it, but from what I understand now, they're using, and I don't know where they're doing their embalming. I guess there's something going on in over in the Middle East. I don't know, but they established a military embalming corps, and from what I've gathered, I haven't really checked into it real deep, but they go in. If you've got a license, when you go in as an E7, but I don't think you advance very far. And it's pretty well, but you start in as an E7, and there are several mortuaries around over the world. I don't know exactly where all of them are. I know there's the big one is that a lot of people like to be assigned to is in Frankfurt, Germany.
That's what I was going to ask if it
And
was in Germany.
they operate like a funeral home.
Uh-huh.
And of course, there's people over there with dependents and everything, and they do their embalming and put them in a casket, and they even have services over there because there's family and friends and everything. But most of what we did, and most of what is happening out of the combat zones, we embalmed the body. What we did, we preserved it. I embalmed it, preserved it. I didn't do the restorative work on them. We got them preserved so they could get back to the country. Anybody's home who was west of the Mississippi River went to Oakland Army Base. They have a big warehouse there where they've got a staff with civilian embalmers that do the restoration work and the dressing and making the decision whether viewable or non-viewable and send them back out to their homes. If you live east of the Mississippi, you go to Dover, Delaware, and they have the same thing there. And then you have people that escort the bodies from those places to their home, and this escort stays with the body until the service and the burial is completed. Now, I had assignments. My assignment was that when I left Vietnam and I got my 30 days at home, I was supposed to go to the Oakland base and escort bodies back to the funeral homes. My dad had died. I had about another 8 months in time to go, and they let me out. because he was a farmer. He had about 300 and some acres of soybeans in the field, and it was in August, and he started cutting for soybeans in September.
Yeah.
He had corn, and he had about 100 or so acres of corn, and we had a couple hundred head of hogs, and nobody to take care of them. So they let me out about 6 to 8 months early, something like that.
So you went back to the farm.
And I went back to my farm for 2 years. Then my sister was into high school then, and we let what rental land we had go. Mom rented out the rest of the farm, and I went back to funeral work.
Wow.
And I've been at it ever since.
That's crazy.
Patients are quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes the people that come in aren't.
Yeah, I can imagine.
No doubt
I
about
can
that.
imagine
Yes,
the
sir.
family is definitely not.
Yes, if there's any problems, any factions within the family, it's going to show up.
Oh yeah.
That always brings, death always brings out. There's not too many people that pass away that you don't hear some friction with the families, and that's a shame.
I think
Reno is
it's,
good though.
I think it's more so now than it was
Yeah,
years gone by.
Everyone kind of expects more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And yeah, that's the way it's always been.
My parents said they're spending it all. Don't expect nothing.
Yeah.
So that's right. Why not? You work for it.
Yeah, it's your
spend
life.
every bit.
Yeah, it's your life. Yeah.
Do you have any other questions that you would
No,
like to
that's an amazing story because you hear guys that were in combat that have these crazy rescue stories. The guy we were with last week just told an amazing story about getting rescued, getting marched to a POW camp. And you hear, they're incredible, but that's the majority.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your side of it, I've never sat down with someone that was an embalmer for any military, let alone the Army, especially that time period.
Actually, I was not supposed to be an embalmer. I had a license, but they were doing it through civilian, and the civilians were running a GS-13, which is high.
Yeah, that's big.
That's up with your lieutenant colonel and
Yeah,
major and
it's a lot
lieutenant
of
colonel
money.
rate.
Yeah.
That's what they were pulling at that time. And as I say, I had my license. I went to Fort Lee and went through the Memorial Activities School, where they taught us how to do the fingerprints and then the dental charts and anything for identification. And that's what I was supposed to do when I went over. And I went over there, and I did that for about maybe a month. And the colonel come back one day, and he said, "Hey," he said, "I see you've got a license." And he said, "You're doing this." He said, "I can teach anybody to do this in about 3 or 4 weeks." But he said, "I can't get a licensed embalmer."
Yeah.
He said, "You go back there and work in that embalming." And he said, "You're going to have to work 4 hours a day extra." But he said, "I'll forget you're in there." And he said, "There isn't going to be any sergeants or anybody else aggravating you." So that's what it is. And unusual, I never had a rifle assigned to me.
Is that right?
The whole time you were over there.
All the time I was over
Wow.
there. I lived in a 7-story hotel. It was not a Howard Johnson's
No.
hotel.
No,
It
I
was
can't
not-
imagine in Saigon it was.
It was. In fact, you kind of wondered if it was going to stand. But there was 4 hours.
Better than
Oh, hell
most of the
yes.
facilities.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, God, yes. We were so far ahead of the guys in the field.
Yeah.
I mean, it was horrible. We visited people that would come in out of the field. I remember one time I went out to the flight line, and we picked up 96 decomposed bodies off of one plane load.
Oh wow.
And guys had tried to go up the hill. There was 2 hills over there, and I don't remember the names. I don't remember the numbers or anything. But anyway, I know that they were Marines, and they tried to go up this hill, and the Viet Cong was above them, and they slaughtered them. And they held them down for several days, and nobody could get into them. And those bodies laid there in the sun in like 100-degree weather. And for 2, 3, 4 days. And
90% humidity.
And when we got them back, I mean, they were really, really decomposing. They were in bad shape.
How was that transition from like the civilian? Because obviously, when you were in the civilian world, I mean, you've done it, but not that in that capacity.
Well,
That transition to doing so many and working 12, 14 hours a day or more.
yeah, well, we never worked over 12 because there was another shift ready to come behind us. But it was it was completely foreign to anything we had done. I had done because you would get maybe in a normal time. Well, I was working up there before we had Interstate 70. We had a good many deaths and stuff on it, and you might get you know 2 or 3 probably maybe trauma cases this month, and then you may go 3 or 4 months and never had any. Where over there, everyone was a trauma case.
Yeah,
Everyone.
every single one of them. I bet you learned I had a lot of on-the-job training.
Oh, Lord, yes. We had. I learned more stuff over there than most. I seen more stuff over there in 1 year than a lot of guys see in a lifetime.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's, it's part of it. It had to be done.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
it did. Well,
We
thank you
had
for.
several guys that broke, and just we had one guy. He was a civilian. Been over there. He'd been over there for 2 tours, and he was a very good bomber, excellent guy. And one day he like that just went off. They took him out to Long Bend, put him in the mental ward. He was out there for about 6 weeks or so. And they brought him back through, and he stopped and talked to us. You could tell he wasn't just right. And they shipped him back home, and we never saw him again. So I guess he got all right. He was from North Dakota, went back up there.
Wow.
But we had several guys that just mentally broke at it.
I can imagine.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's
going from like what you said, the civilian world, where you're having 3 or 4 a month, to that. I could only imagine.
yeah. That's
But we had some Vietnamese people there that helped us. They did the cleanup. They did some cleanup and moved stuff around and everything. But we had huge amounts of supplies come through. We got our sheets. Our sheets came in plywood containers that was 8 feet long, 4 foot wide, 4 foot tall. And you put that many sheets in something, that's
a bunch of sheets.
awful. That's awful heavy.
yeah, extremely.
I mean, the old forklifts, they groaned when they picked it up. And where we dealt with, where I'm dealing with fluid coming in 16-ounce bottles, ours came in 15-gallon drums.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
And we had stretchers, body bags and stuff there. That of course, they would come in stretchers and body bags. Then they had points all over the country. Each camp or so had a point, and they picked the bodies up and brought them to that point. And then they gathered them up from that point, put them on airplanes, and shipped them to Saigon. So we had all of Vietnam was feeding because we were the only mortuary in Saigon when I was there. I mean, in Vietnam. And then they started one at Da Nang about a month after I left, and that took a lot of pressure off of it.
I can imagine.
But it was we had like times we had body bags done up in bundles of 10. And we would have, several thousand of them stacked up. And when the guys came in, there was always an escort came in with a body from the points to our place. And they would come in and bring the bodies in, and then they would pick up body bags and stretchers and take back to their points. We had to collapse them in stretchers. They were canvas and wood handles, and they would fold. And we had we'd have like 1,000 of those things stacked up outside of us. And then we had the body bags stacked up, probably 1,000 or so at a time. And we'd reuse them. We'd bring them in, wash them out and everything, wrap them up, and they'd tie them up. And then the guys would bring them in, then they'd pick up some, get on the airplane, and go back where they came from.
Wow.
Man, oh man. Yeah, I'm very interested. Like you said.
Yeah,
I've got
this
pictures.
is
I've got some slides. I'm going to get them onto DVD, but I've got a bunch of slides of it, and showing how we shipped them back from there. We had transfer cases, aluminum transfer cases. We put them in, and when we get ready to ship, we had a lowboy trailer, and it was a 40-foot long lowboy trailer, and we would take and load these transfer cases on that lowboy trailer, and they'd take it to the airport and ship them. I've got some slides showing the trailer sitting there with the loaded up. And we didn't get shipments very often. When we get them, it'd take 2 trailer loads to bring in our supplies.
Yeah, this is a lot of supplies you needed to accomplish what you were doing.
Yeah. That's a huge task that you guys had to do. Huge. Especially being the only ones there at that time period.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your service to the country. And I'm really glad you got to come out and us take you to lunch today. So I really appreciate it.
But it's something we all do. But,
Some more than most, I think, though.
well, at least I was never shot at. And I had a bed to lay down and sleep in every night. And
Yeah.
we did have a ceiling fan, which most of them didn't.
No.
I mean, I have unzipped them body bags and we used to find guys covered in leeches. Some of those leeches would be that long, big around as your finger. Or you may have been in Vietnam. I don't
No, I
know.
wasn't. No, but I've talked to guys, and they said they'd be, in that water for days on end, get leeches. And of course, you know how your skin gets just from
Yeah.
being like in a bathtub
Oh,
for a
yeah.
little while, a hot tub.
Yep.
Imagine being
Yeah.
there days.
You got sores all over you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys live an awful hard life for that.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was the largest repatriation project that has ever been attempted. There's nothing on that scale even exists today.
No.
Because we had over 55,000 deaths in Vietnam. And today we've only had less than 5,000, I think, in 10 years.
Yeah. We just had the wall out here in July, the traveling Vietnam Wall.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite a project we put together, but it turned out. It was a 2-year thing. We worked on it, and it turned out way better than I ever dreamt it could have. It was a proud moment for the Post here.
I would say I helped put a lot of those guys' names on that wall.
Yep, that was your job.
So, I know I don't think I ever had a day that I bombed less than 3. I had days I didn't bomb 8 or so. Depends on the condition, how fast, what we're doing.
Yeah, it sounded like, you had 8, did you say you had 8 embalmers and should have had 24? Is that what you said earlier?
No, we had about 16, but we had 12 tables.
Okay.
And we'd have we're at 8 or so on the table. I don't think I ever saw all 12 tables operating at the same time, but we had times maybe have 8 or 10, and then you had 2 shifts.
Yeah.
So we had more embalmers than that, but and most of the guys were fairly older men that was doing the embalming.
I think you'd have to be. You'd have to have your wits about you, I would assume. You'd have to have some kind of.
You had went through apprenticeship and
Yeah,
stuff, so
I mean,
that worked out well for you in your
Yeah.
favor.
I'd had the apprenticeship, and I'd already got my license.
Yeah. That choice that you made not to go to veterinary school could have made all the difference in the world. What ended up happening when you did get your papers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, they use veterinaries in the country too.
It's true.
But,
They do. They do. They do.
But I thought that was very strange that I could have spent a year in war zone and never had a rifle.
Never had a rifle assigned. I know that is very uncommon.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was almost one of the first things.
Uh-huh.
They assigned you a weapon.
They had there at the hotel, there was rifles down in the storeroom and racks, and supposedly if we'd ever been attacked or anything, you could go down and draw a rifle.
Yes.
But I never had one in my possession.
Wow.
That is unbelievable.
And it would have been a term of catastrophe if we'd have done it. Because we had that 7-story building. I think there's around 700 men lived in it, and most of them were clerks, and most of them were quartermaster type stuff,
Yeah.
and clerks and things.
Yeah, the stuff, the shooting, a little bit of shooting that they had done was probably basic training.
Right. Yeah. They'd probably wound up shooting each other.
Well, I appreciate you let me record it and tell the story.